Performance criterion 4.2 in week 2 determines and confirm delivery strategies and required assessment methods and tools. So delivery strategies, again, because you would be looking at your unit of competency there, you'll see that it's bold and italicized delivery strategies. So we can turn to the range statement once again for the range of the definition. So under delivery strategies, it has, may include any of the following. So it isn't that it must include all of them. It just, in each case study, may include some of these. So we can have a look here and see that John is definitely a face-to-face strategy. Susan's definitely an online strategy. Some of you have had some blended learning with some face-to-face components as well as online. Susan collaborates during the webcasts on a Monday night, and Susan's team, that is, as well, Susan's group. And, it could very well emerge as being learner-paced. I guess really in this learner group, it's more tutor-paced because I'm only opening up each new module or unit of competency week by week. So, had that have all been open to you with all of the learning resources there, you could have, set a much quicker pace. But, we're after that quality control. We're specifying that we're contextualizing in this unit, and that's giving you that level of quality assurance. So we're sort of steering away from that learner pace with you at the moment. So the context, John's would be in the workplace. The context of the delivery for Susan is in her home. So we've just done 4.1. We've thoroughly gone through the TAS, and a lot of that learning, delivery strategies is covered in there. Now, as part of the delivery strategies, we also have to think of the learning style, and that also ties in with 1.4, identifying and considering the characteristics of the target learner group. So I'm just going to share with you, this is the learning design tool. Now this isn't mandatory. If it comes up, there we are. This is another Australian flexible learning framework tool that is available to RTOs and their trainers and assessors. It's a free tool. It's here to support the vet community. And once again, it comes down to the context. What's the budget? What's the time frame? How many learners in the group? Is this something that the strategy is that you could somehow recreate this through e-learning that a learner can do as part of their induction or part of their enrollment? Currently, this is really set up where you actually have to download this program. You can actually see the icon of it come up here on my board. And the way that it's currently designed here is the trainer would have to go through a heck of a lot of questioning with, the client, like the learner, and the client who is their supervisor. So it's not something that we use here at Evoke. However, there's elements of it that we can piece together at certain times if we need to. So if we just start that, we'll start a new project. We'll just quickly go into here, make it, just stick it in my current section for your training there. Hit continue to proceed. Okay, so I'm just going to whiz through. I'm not going to fill in all the rest of this. AQF level would be level 4 for Susan. It might be the way that you want to design their learning program, perhaps. I just use my templated form, but this learner preference was quite worthwhile. So, this might be something that a previous supervisor might be aware of, or if they're able to self-reflect, they might have quite a good idea about their own capabilities. So, you know, this actually helps build their learning design type. Following structured activities and presentations, you know, is that them being told and shown things is how they might best respond. This is about how will they best respond. Take things in small parts, a chunk at a time. Gosh, I think we all like that from time to time. Or they might be more autonomous, so they might prefer to find things out for themselves. And I know I very much prefer that than to stop and be patient and follow a structured presentation. Yeah, so basically you could tick the ones that they best respond to, and that's under learner preference. And you just move from that learner preference straight to the learning design type. So after you've ticked a few of those, so let's say it was me, for example. I like to find things out for myself. You know, want to make it relevant. And we'll just find out. So at the moment, it says that I'm task guided according to the small amount of information that I provided there, and a little bit autonomous as well. But let's just see, I've actually created one for John, and that is available in our sample of our work-based learning program. So I've suggested that he likes doing something several times in a variety of ways, repeatedly doing something in exactly the same way to meet a standard or procedure. And these are very characteristic of that Certificate 1, Certificate 2 level. Structured tasks that increase familiarity and awareness. Okay, and this is where they respond best to, you know, the more structured tasks rather than the autonomous ones. So we actually had John, the fictitious John, complete that same profile and characteristics for the learning style. That's a quick 2-minute quiz that was left there for you on course sites, and found that he was a visual/kinesthetic learner. So not a lot of reading, not a lot of listening to long lectures for our mate John. So this is just going through the work-based learning program, and we may as well just take a moment. This is the other product, the other piece of evidence that you'll be using in week 2. So you can just fill in your name here. We're just doing one, saving as a work-based learning program, change the file name for John, or case study to John. Fill in your name there. The client's organisation, look, let's just call it Mike's Bikes. Mike's his boss. We're just playing around there. That's the organisation that John works for, let's say. Now, I've put in some objectives here for John already. When we looked earlier at 3.3, specify assessment requirements, we can go beyond the evidence guide in the training package and actually interview the client, being Mike, or the supervisor, John's boss, about, you know, what is it that they visualize the learning objective to be? What is it they want to see John be able to do at the other side? So they had particular concerns about John and his safety with the forklifts. So we needed to really specify that clearly. So we want John at the end of this to know where the forklift access only areas are and comply by not walking in that area at any time, you know. So if there's areas that are forklift only, he's not allowed to walk around in there. We also want him to thoroughly understand, like he would any of the learners, the correct loads for forklifts. Okay, we don't want him overloading the forklift. So that's actually come from the client. That's information from the supervisors there. So that's also how we specify the assessment requirements contextualised to this business and contextualised to any gaps in work performance that John has, especially because he seems to have a bit of a history of walking in the no-go zone. Perhaps he can't actually read the English language on the signs. Perhaps we need to get some more visual signage up there, which would be part of your risk control. So, had there been, and there may not be, but if they're, because this is work-based and perhaps they're training because of a performance issue, you might need to be aware, even if you don't raise it with John, about some background information about why there's a gap. So in this case, John's not only training in driving a forklift because he needs the license, but he also needs the safety aspect. So John was actually involved in a near-miss accident while walking in the path of a forklift, and this could have been fatal. So if there's a time where the learner's not really valuing the training, it might be time to sort of stand up and say, listen, you've actually coming along to do this training because you were involved in a near-miss accident. We need to make sure that you're safe and that others around you are safe. But usually that might just be some background knowledge, so you would know for that particular performance criterion of the unit that you would really emphasise that. You would really want to assess that, with a wide range of evidence to absolutely ensure that that message has gotten through now. And there might be some resources from the workplace of any incorrect work practices and consequences, and forklifts are a classic. So we'll actually go down just before 4.5 and show a great little YouTube clip there to show the consequences of dangerous practices with forklifts. There might be some special terms. We talked about the terminology there, pedagogy for teachers. And then, a greater description of what that means. We don't have any terminology for John at this point. You definitely want to fill this in, so you'd put maybe John Smith, John, whatever you want to call him, and his job description. So he might just be a trainee, warehouse operator, I don't know, warehouse officer. For case 1, you'd put in Susan's name and you'd put down job description would be teacher, and her career goals would actually be, vet, trainer and assessor. So here we are, we've got John's profile here. This was the one that was built with the flexible toolboxes. Let's just, leave that as the same for Susan for argument's sake, for our evidence, that's fine. Okay, for Susan, you'd put the code and title of her qualification. You'll all know that by now, TAE 40110, Certificate 4 in Training and Assessment, and that is the correct way. You mention the code first and then the title. And we only need to do this learning program for Susan for one of the units of competency. So perhaps you might want to put down tonight's unit, which is TAE-DES 401A, and it's titled Design and Develop Learning Programs. You can actually get that off your downloaded unit of competency and actually put in here that it's a core unit. Okay, so we'll leave the information about the workplace tasks and staff involved and learning outcomes for both. You don't have enough organisational knowledge at this stage, and your RTO would certainly be helping you out with a lot of this documentation. If it's not the RTO, it would be your supervising training and assessor. Okay, you can see that I've actually created I've actually inserted an object which is for John, and that came from the flexible toolbox that we had open up here, that learning design tool for VET, and that was actually one of the final steps where it actually built a profile. And if you were to use something like that, you would actually just go into insert. You would insert an object, and then you would actually search out where you've saved that and attach it that way. Okay, so you know, you can actually create from file and find it that way. But look, it would be quite satisfactory to just look at our previous PowerPoint, and for delivery strategies, I'm happy for you to put face-to-face for John, online learning for Susan, in the workplace context for John, in the home for Susan. That would be quite sufficient for our needs here today. We haven't done our assessment component yet, so this part isn't quite relevant to us, so we can leave that blank. This will be not applicable for Susan, organisational strategies, because she isn't learning, you know, as a work-based training. So whereas John, there might be some organisational strategies around things like training and assessment occurs during downtime at shift change, which might be 7 p.m. till 7:30. There might be a toolbox meeting with the changeover shifts, and that might give you a window of half an hour to work with John. What that means is you might actually arrive at 6:30 and do some theory and, you know, review of competency judgments for half an hour, you know, and also preview the lesson plan and objectives. Yeah, that might work for half an hour, and then you're actually there on the floor working through those procedures. So, you know, that might be an example of an organisational strategy which revolves around the time management. And as far as monitoring the learning, you would have the supervisor perhaps observing you know, when you're not there, there's a particular portion of that package around OH&S, so you're making sure that you've explicitly taught him very clearly where he's allowed to be walking and where he's not, where the forklift areas only are. So that would be one of the monitoring options, and then of course it would be, you know, the assessor judging the competency perhaps. And, you know, there could be a supervising assessor. Okay, we'll learn about this moderating and validating more in weeks 3 and 4. Now, John has some barriers. He has language literacy and numeracy, and what we've suggested there, at least to address the English as the second language, is to perhaps use that Dragon, which is a nuance product, and that's a voice to text feature, so he can actually speak in to the microphone, and this Dragon software will convert his, you know, from his accent as well into, you know, readable, legible text. You know, perhaps that's a little too advanced, perhaps there's not a budget for that, so it might actually be some Skyping, it might be just, you know, direct observation and questioning So, you know, it might be more verbal, and then you would actually, as the assessor, have to jot this down. But as you haven't done the assessment modules, we'll just leave it at that. Okay. The process for validation, you'll understand validation in weeks 3 and 4. In this case, it's just more of an informal meeting with the learner and your assessing supervisor and his supervisors, just to make sure that you're meeting the objectives and being fair and applying rules of evidence, principles of assessment that you'll all start to learn very, very soon in weeks 3 and 4. And you can just tick off all of those and read through them. Pathways. For John, go back to the license training package that you've selected and look at the qualifications. There's a couple of Certificate 2s in warehousing. You might just want to put Certificate 2 warehousing as a pathway, because then that one particular training package, it would be one of the electives that would put him on that path for a Certificate 2. As for Susan, go back to your training package and look beyond a Certificate 4. Look at the revision from last week to see what further pathways there are. There was a AQF 5 level, there was a 7 level. Just go back and have a look at that when you fill it out for Susan. Now you can just print your name and your date and just leave the client's signature and date blank. So hopefully that's helped you fill out, you know, there'll be elements of this for Susan that aren't as applicable, but that'll certainly be more weighted there for John.